Hey guys, welcome back to Finding the Rhythm. I'm showing my face in this episode along with my mediocre bass playing skills so we can take a good look at how to animate the bassist avatar that you see playing on stage in the background animation of a rock band track. So there's different ways to go about this and it's not particularly difficult. I'm just going to show you my process of how I do it, but I just happened to start playing the bass as a result of playing rock band so much. And you can get an entry-level bass like this super cheap. They're like 150 bucks new. You can probably get it for 100 bucks on Craigslist if you want to get your own bass and just start sounding out the bass lines for the songs that you're working on for rock band. If you don't want to do that, or it's just not up your alley, you can also potentially work with the bass player for the band if you have access to them, which is not always the case, and either have them send you sheet music or some tabs or a quick and dirty, iPhone video like you're watching right now, just zoomed in close enough so you can mainly see what frets they're moving their hand to, which is the important thing that you're going to want. Other ways you could go about it would be to maybe have a friend of yours who is a guitar player or a bass player sit down with the isolated bass stem that you get from the band and sound it out on their instrument and let you watch or shoot video, or you can even sometimes, if you're quick, work through setting the animation cues while they're doing it. I'm not a guitar player, so that's actually how I animate the guitar portions of the rock band tracks that I work on. Is I have a buddy who is an amazing guitar player. He's been playing for 25 years or more, and I'll just send him the guitar stem after I've cut it and picked out which parts are going to be the playable parts for my rock band track, and I'll just have him learn the song, and then we'll walk through it, and he essentially goes, okay, at this part I'm on the 5th fret, at this part I'll go up to the 12th fret, and I'll do this chord shape or whatever. Because really the three things that we're able to control in terms of animating the guitar player's hands are what fret position his left hand is on. I'm left-handed, so it's going to be the opposite of whatever you see me doing, but for everyone else it would be their left hand moving up and down the fretboard. And then you can also change what chord shape their hand is doing, which doesn't typically come into play when you're animating for the bass, although it could. That's mostly something that you'll use when you're animating for the guitar. And then the third thing that you can change is what's going on with their right hand, or in my case, my left hand. They could either be plucking the bass, or you can change that to strumming with a pick, just depending on what you want to see. So, without further ado, I'll start working on the bass line for Heartstrings, and I basically just start listening to the song and start sounding it out. So here's the intro that I'll be working on first. Cuts out for a little bit before it comes back in after a few bars. So let's listen to just the bass during that section. And that sort of rocking back and forth core riff that you hear, that's sort of the foundation for this entire bass part for the song, at least during the verse sections. And then before that, there's a little intro riff that actually happens again in a moment when the bass comes back in. And that sounds like this. So once you figure out what the bass part is, the next thing you want to do is figure out what fret position your hand is going to be in. And bearing in mind that depending on where you are on the fretboard, you can usually access multiple frets without having to move your hand from that position. So what we're most interested in is the fret that the index finger is on. So you might be playing notes up here with your other fingers, but in terms of animating the Rock Band avatar, we mainly just want to know what fret to set his index finger on, and then the animation will kind of take care of the rest. Unfortunately, you can't really control what specific strings he's on, but what the game will do is it'll look at the gems that you've authored within that section, and like let's say you've set his finger on the 5th fret. If you then have gems that are ascending from there, the game engine will animate the rest of his movements within that position, either going up to the higher strings or up to higher frets, so you're shortening the strings, and the animation would kind of make sense. Even though it won't necessarily be exactly right, it'll still kind of be somewhere within the realm of what it would really be. So that's kind of what we're doing, is we're not trying to get an exact reproduction of what the bassist would really do, but we are trying to at least get into the neighborhood of where if somebody who does play an instrument for real were to watch your animation, they wouldn't be going, oh, that's not even close. So that's sort of the goal. So for that intro riff, I can actually play almost all of it from this position without moving my hand. So right now my index finger is on the 8th fret, and I can get as far as before I have to move my hand. And then I'm going to move from, notice my index finger is still here on the 8th fret. I'm going to move it down 2 frets to the 6th fret. I'm still playing with the other finger, but again, the important thing is where's the index finger, even if it's not the one that's fretting a string right at that moment. And then for that last note, I'm actually playing the open E string, and we have a special way that we get the animation to trigger the guy to take his hands off the fret altogether, and I'll show you that in just a minute. We use a text event to make that happen. Okay, so here we are back in Reaper. Let's take a look at the bass chart. I'll go ahead and solo that. And here's that intro riff, the way we charted it and reduced it in the previous episodes. So I was able to get all the way up to here with my finger still, with my index finger on the 8th fret. So the way that I signal that in the animation is I come down here to these MIDI lanes and I start adding notes to tell the game where I want it to move his hand on the fretboard. And so for this first part, for example, I want to put his index finger on the 8th fret, so I just look over here. And these frets are actually not labeled in the default template that everybody gets. The lowest one and the highest one are, but you end up having to sit there and count to make sure you're on the right lane. So I just numbered these for my own convenience, but if you would like those, I'll go ahead and post the text file with these note names, so that if you want to use that, you can. You just come up here to File and say Load Note Names from File, and then you just browse to that text file, and it'll load them right up, and they'll show up over there. So the 8th fret is here, and I'll just make sure I'm right at the beginning there. And then I'll drag it out until this point where I know the hand needs to shift, and at that point I was moving my index finger down to the 6th fret. So you don't want to bump your notes right up next to each other like this, because the empty space in between is the time that the animation engine uses to animate the transition where he's sliding his hand from one position to another. So you want at least a 16th note worth of space in there. Otherwise you'll see his hand kind of teleporting up and down the fretboard, and it looks kind of weird. So at this point, this was the moment where I would take my hand off the fretboard altogether and just play the open E string. And so the way that I would do that is I'll just have this note continue for as long as we want the hand to be in that position. But in terms of pulling the fingers off, we'll use a text event down here in the text event area. So I'll just double click, make sure this is set to text event. And then on the list, I'm going to choose a hand map called drop D. And there's hand maps and strum maps. The strum maps let you choose between picking, slapping, and the default, which for the bass player is going to be plucking the strings, fingerstyle. So, but for the hand map, I'll choose drop D, and that will cause him to pull his fingers off the fretboard altogether. And then when I get to the end of that note and I want to go back to normal, I have to essentially turn that off. So I'll use another text event, which is, it's just another hand map called default, and that'll make him go back to his normal behavior. And this was the piece that I was able to play two different ways. I could either play it by sliding between frets, or in this part where I'm not hearing a slide yet, I was actually able to play it by keeping my index finger on the second fret and just rocking back and forth between those two notes. So I'll move to the second fret at this point. Now here, there's a little slide down to the open E. So the way I would do that is I would sustain this MIDI note until the beginning of the slide. I'll use the empty space for the actual slide to happen. And then because it's sliding down, I need to put a note down here on the first fret so there's something for him to slide to. And then the animation will take care of what happens in between there. But then the actual note itself, so I'll probably move that back here a little bit, and then I'll just have him play the open string, but have him be positioned over that first fret. And then I got to remember to turn that off again when I get to the end of that note. So I just go back to default. And the reason I try to keep the hand on the same fret position that it was in right before the open note is if you happen to be seeing it in the camera angle, it makes it read a little better. If you move the note somewhere else and they end up sliding their hand off to some other fret, and you can't even really necessarily see that they're playing an open note. So if you're going for accuracy or realism, it's just a nice little way to make it easier to see. So then we're here on the second fret again for this last little bit, and then that's the end of the intro. Now there's a long pause where the bass player is not playing anything, and then when it picks back up again here, it's a slightly modified version of that intro riff that we played at the very beginning. So I would come back to the 8th fret for this part. It lasted until about here, but what I want to be careful of is the difference between the 2nd fret where I left off and the 8th fret where I'm going to pick it up again, because remember, this empty space in between is what the game is going to use to animate the hand position transitioning between two different frets. And so what you would see during this time is if the camera happened to catch the bass player, is you'd see his hand slowly drifting from one position to another, which might look a little odd. So what I would recommend doing is just stretch this note out during the gap, so his hand will stay on that 2nd fret until just before you want him to come in again. Might give him a little bit more time to move here, and then he's ready to go again. So this part is all the same as what we've already done. This part here, where it goes into that first verse, okay, so now it's the same bass line as the verse, but it's like chorus, pre-chorus, post-chorus type bass line. So instead of holding this note, it's just plucking it, but it would be the same animation. And again, you don't have to do individual notes. You can just, as long as they're on that same fret, you just stretch it out for that period of time. So what I like to do, if I'm not sure if what I'm doing
is right, or if it's going to look good, is I'll go ahead and send it over to the console and have a look at it. Now, there's some other animation cues we need to put in here, otherwise when we fire this up in audition mode in Rock Band, is the bass player won't be playing his bass. You'll actually see his fingers move around on the fretboard, but he won't be plucking the strings. It's kind of weird. So the way that you get him to play is with an animation cue that works on all of the Rock Band avatars, which just says play. So I'll just go ahead and turn the full mix back on, come back into the bass chart. So during the count-in, I have them in a state called idle real time, which I can't remember if that animation cue is there in the template that everybody gets, but I know I would have at least added it to mine because it always needs to be there. And then what I would probably do when she starts strumming that acoustic is transition them into a different state called idle, where they still won't be playing their instruments, but at least they'll be paying attention to the beat and start kind of bobbing along with it, as opposed to milling around and checking their watch and whatever else they do during the idle real-time animations. And we should see him actually start playing at that point. And then the other thing you want to do during the testing phase, or if you're checking on some animation, is you can either hit something on the controller. I want to say it's the left trigger button will let you just cycle through a bunch of preset camera angles that are intentionally designed in audition mode just for you to look at things like their faces, so you can check on lip sync, or their hands, so you can see if your animation cues are working well. You can also, if you want to, move over to the venue track and put in directed cuts or close-up camera angles to hold on a specific area if you want to look at that and do it manually. I actually came in and did this earlier when I was checking on something. These are directed cuts. This particular one is called bass close, which will focus on the fretboard, the bassist fretboard. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I will export the MIDI just like we've done in the past. Come over here to Magma and hit build or build an audition. I kind of think the build an audition button is jinxed. I always throw an error every time I use it. But if you haven't made too many changes since your last one and you're pretty confident it's going to go through, then that saves you an extra click if you want to do it that way. Yay, it worked. So then I just send it over to the console and we'll have a look at that animation and see if it's looking more or less like the real version.
So if you play the guitar or the bass, then you'll know that notes can appear in more than one position on the fretboard. And that's important when it comes to animating for Rock Band, mostly in terms of the transitions between two notes. And that's because you can either have a nice clean handoff between notes like this, like we hear in this verse riff that we're working on, which sounds that way during some parts of the song. So during those parts, I would probably be inclined to have my animation cue set the index finger of the avatar to the 2nd fret, and then just let the animation engine animate his fingers within that space. But in other parts of the song, we hear the bass player playing those same two notes, but with a slide in between. And you can't achieve that in that position, because you'd be sliding down and then going to a higher note, which would sound weird. So to slide up to the higher note, we're actually going to need to see a slide where his index finger moves from the 4th fret up to the 7th fret. And it's cool when you're playing Rock Band and you see it cut to the bass player and you actually see his hand move, and it's, you know, synced up with the audio like that. So that's kind of what we're going for. Okay, let's take a look at another part of the song. This is sort of a bridge or a transition section.
I wanna take it slow and that's okay. When you say I'm finished making the same old mistakes.
So listening to just the bass part sounds like this. So that's right here, 5th, I'm on the 5th fret. So I can hit, and then I come up to the 7th fret with another finger, but I don't have to move my index finger. So again, that's what I'm paying attention to in terms of the animation, is I'll just set that cue on fret number 5, as long as they're doing that, and I won't need to move it. I'll just let the game animate his fingers however it's going to do it, but it's probably either going to look like that, or you might see him, you know, drop down to a higher string to play that note. At least it'll kind of be into the right area.
Coming in here to my chart, I'm going to get a note onto the 5th, an animation note right onto the 5th fret when that section starts, and then I'm just going to leave it there until it goes back to that same verse riff again. Happens during the verse and the ah-ahs.
Okay, so now let's take a look at the chorus for Heartstrings. And this kicks in up here at measure 84. So there's a bit there that repeats a couple times. Let's hear how that sounds by itself. And then it repeats. So that's that low E string again. And then on the 2nd fret on this string here, and then dropping down to the next string, still on the 2nd fret. But doing a really quick slide up to the 4th fret. And then the next part is 5th fret, and then it slides up to the 8th fret, and then it repeats. And then it comes back, it's the coming all undone part. And then when she sings my heartstring, the actual word heartstrings, there's a jump up to the octave. And on a guitar or bass that's in standard tuning, you can always find the octave by just coming over 2 frets and down 2 strings. So here's what that sounds like. I'll see if I can play it along with the full mix here.
Okay, so let's take a look at how we're going to animate that. Here's the gems that we authored for the chorus section. So we've got the open E string, so I'll put in my drop D text event for that. I'll just put a note down here on the, actually I'll go ahead and put it on the 2nd fret, since that's where I know we're going to be for these two. And as soon as that tiny little note gets played, he immediately slides up to the 4th fret. But I got to remember to turn off my drop D hand map. I want to set that back to default. And then I'll let a slide happen in this empty space here. and this is the 5th fret up to the 8th. And again, there's a slide in there, so I'll just leave that empty space. Battery's about to die, so I better hurry. So that part repeats. So I'll skip ahead to... This was... on the... I was playing the 9th fret, but my index finger at that point is actually on like 6 or 7, depending on what kind of hand position you're using. So I'll put it up there on the 9th, and I'll just let it come down to 7, and then slide all the way down to 2. Four, 5 is those last 2 notes. And then up to that octave. So I can leave my hand in that same position to reach that octave. So I'll just leave that animation cue there. And then it's back into the verse again.
So now I'll go ahead and rebuild the song, send it back to the console, and have a look at those animations during the chorus and see if that basically looks like what I want it to look like. So now it's just a matter of working my way through the rest of the song. I would set the last of the animation cues the exact same way you saw me do here. Anytime you've got a section that repeats, you can just repeat the animation cues. Just be careful that you're paying attention to detail and that you're not missing little slides and nuances that the actual instrumentalist might be doing in the mix that you probably already charted in your gems. It's just a good idea to keep your ears open so you don't miss those cool little details that you can incorporate into the project. So I hope this is helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. We'll be working on charting the expert guitar part for Heartstrings, and thanks a lot for watching. So that you can animate essentially the transition between 2 notes. Son of a